Hey everybody, welcome to In Air's Kitchen. Blue's going to help me out, maybe Clem and Violet will join too. We're doing canning today, and this is something we haven't done on the show to date, but it's a lot of fun. And we're going to can tomatoes. There are some different methods of canning for different kinds of things, and so we're going to start out with tomatoes. There's a pretty straightforward one, and I hope that we can make this feel easy enough to understand that people will try it at home. I think canning can be intimidating for a lot of folks. And before we get started with handling all these tomatoes and getting the jars ready, I thought maybe I'll just talk a little bit about canning. Some of the things I think are most important to know. Number one, I'm not sure you're going to save a lot of money canning. Maybe if you have a lot of space and you grow a big garden so that you're canning all of your own produce, and maybe if you planted it from seed, and if you've already got all the jars that you've invested in, even then I think that it would be pretty hard to justify canning from a cost saving standpoint. You can buy a really beautiful can of organic tomatoes in a can at the grocery store for like $2, $2.50. We're going to make a bunch of cans of tomatoes, but these boxes of beautiful fresh Roma tomatoes I just got, these were like $40 a box, which is a pretty fair price. And it's going to be hard to justify this on a pure cost basis. The jars themselves are also expensive. If you don't have them, you're going to have to buy jars. Once you own these, then you don't need as much. You might need bands occasionally, and you'll need fresh lids every year when you do canning. So these need to be fresh each time you can. So 12 lids here was $6. So those were 50 cents a lid. You might be able to find lids for less money than that, but already that's, you're not too far off from the cost of canned tomatoes. So I'm not trying to discourage anybody by this. I think you need to be realistic about what you're going to get out of it. I don't think this is so much something to do because you're frugal. It's maybe something to do if you want to be self-sufficient. It could be something to do because you just enjoy being part of the food and understanding how this works, which is probably why I started doing it. I was just curious about canning and how it worked and wanted to experience it. But the thing that I love most about canning now, and the reason we do it, you can see our shelves up here are getting pretty empty. We usually have a lot of canned things up there. It's just like magic when you're in the middle of the winter time and you open up a jar of peaches that came off your peach tree or some tomatoes that came locally, and you just bring a bit of that summer right into your winter day, and I think it's just a really wonderful part of life. So that's my big pitch for canning. Is really bringing some of the wonder of summer into winter months. But if you're trying to do this from a money perspective, I'm not sure I would recommend it. So we can a lot of different things. There's no canning police out there, and I think people are probably more scared than they need to be about food safety. The most dangerous thing about canning is probably botulism. There are some difficult to detect compounds that can be generated, especially canned meat, but it's possible to have problems with other canned things. Most vegetables, when you don't can them properly, the lid will just pop, and you'll know, and they'll just start fermenting. So the failure isn't that bad. So if you end up canning stuff, which I've done a lot of times, you didn't do something right, usually what will happen is the lids will pop, and you'll hear them and you'll see them. And then at that point, you can just grab it and put it in the refrigerator, and as long as you use them the next few weeks, you're fine. So it's not so bad. That said, there are some guidelines we can follow to make sure that our canned foods last a long time and that they're safe. That mostly has to do with how we prepare, how we heat treat, and then what we put in. And it's the things that can help canned goods last a long time: salt, sugar, and acid. These are the same things that help food last when it's not in a can. And so tomatoes historically had a lot of acid, but actually as I was reading recently, a lot of tomatoes are lower in acid now. People like less acid in food. So they're growing varieties with less and less acid. As a result, there's increasingly a recommendation to add lemon juice or citric acid to your canned tomatoes to make sure the pH is at the right level so that there's enough acid in there to keep the tomatoes from going bad. So we're going to do that today. We have some lemons we're going to squeeze and we're going to use some lemon juice. We are using these tomatoes. These are Roma tomatoes. And we got these from Barrel Farm. You want to aim for tomatoes that are just ripe or just under ripe. That's what you're targeting. And we're going to peel these tomatoes and then put them in the jar. There's methods. So peeling them, we're going to take the skin off. There are other methods where you can take all the seeds out or puree them. We're not going to do that. We're just going to peel them. And we're going to pack them in their own juice. We're not going to put water or anything like that. If you put water in there with them, you'd have to change some of the recipe to make them safe. I think we went over a lot of things. The other kinds of things, so this kind of thing, like tomatoes, it's even with the acid we're going to add, it's a relatively low acid environment. And so we're boiling them for a long time. And that's going to help sterilize not just the jar, but the stuff that's in the jar. Other kinds of things that you may can, like peaches, you would do the same. Jellies and jams, you would do the same. Applesauce, you would do the same. All of these things, you'd boil them. And it doesn't affect the quality of the product either, because those are things that already have been exposed to a lot of people. If you're going to can pickles, you can also boil them, but I find that you lose all the crunchiness of the pickle. And so my favorite pickles are you have boiling brine and a really clean jar and really clean cucumbers, and you pour the brine right onto the pickle and then seal it, and you don't process it in the big pot over there, and that gives you a crunchy pickle. But it is a little bit more delicate. If you don't get things right or a little bit dirty, you might have lids that pop. That might be the same method you use for other pickling. Like if you wanted green beans that are really like snappy and crunchy, you might want to pickle them that way. So the method we're showing you right now doesn't give you like a crunchy pickled item. Instead, we're doing like something that's more appropriate to tomatoes, applesauce, jams, jellies, all those kinds of things. And hopefully before the summer's over, we'll make some of those. I don't have a lot yet from this year. This is some peach jam that my sister made and gave to me. And we have a whole bunch of peaches, so after we do these tomatoes for the show, we're probably going to do peaches. We have a peach tree that usually has a lot of peaches, but this year it didn't do well. I think it was too dry out. But we bought these from a local farm. So we'll can peaches. We'll probably can hot sauce this year. We'll probably pickle some things. We'll probably do maybe some Concord grape jelly. We might do some other kinds of jams and jellies. We'll probably do some applesauce. It's whenever you've got a bounty of any grapes or any kind of berries, they make awesome preserves. I think that'll probably be most of what we can. Should we get started with this?
Yeah.
All right. Now, first thing you want to do is wash everything. So I'll just go through the different equipment. Like I said, I think this probably feels intimidating for a lot of people. And I want to make it feel like something you're willing to take on, because it's really not that scary. And people have been canning things forever. My grandmother used to do a lot of canning. My mom didn't do a lot of canning, and so I've learned mostly like since I've been an adult. But now I think a lot of people I know are more interested in canning, so it's gone in some generational cycles. You're going to need a jar, a glass jar, and this company, Ball, has been making them forever. There are other choices. There's a company called Weck that makes jars. They're a little bit more expensive. I like the Ball. I like the size a lot. It's a quart and it's got a wide mouth. And this is a jar I really like and I use for a lot of I use for canning, but I also keep leftovers in my fridge in these jars. So it's nice to have a pretty universal size that's used for a lot of things. These jars come in 2 different size lids. So you got small lids, this is called a regular size lid, and you've got a wide mouth lid. And there's this lid. The way these lids are made right now, they have a coating over the metal to keep the metal from rusting. And then I think they're all like BPA free now. They probably used to have it there. And then they have this layer. It's like it's like a plastic that will soften. People used to use wax or other things for this layer. What this will do is when we clean all this and have it the right temperature, and then we put that on there, that lid will actually deform a little bit and form a really great seal that won't let any air in there. And that's important to making sure that our canned goods stay fresh and not going bad, because we want to keep all the bacteria and yeast from the air from getting in there. So this gasket here is integrated into this lid, and these gaskets are single use. So that's a really important thing to know. Whenever you can, you need fresh lids. You can reuse your band, because the band just holds the lid in place. And once something is canned, once something's canned, you can take that band right off. So this is sort of a funny thing. I remember I first saw it in I don't know, when I was at farm shows back home and stuff. They would often present their canned goods like this, and this is fully sealed, but it doesn't need this necessarily. And sometimes people used to reuse the rings. You don't need a ring for every jar, you just need enough rings for whatever you're processing at the moment. And once the seal's in place, you can store it like this and then keep your rings separately so that you don't need as many rings. You can see most of these I store with the ring. The ring does sort of protect it a little bit, so it doesn't get knocked as easily. Yeah, this is boiling really nicely now. So I got there's a lot of water to boil on this episode, so I got some of that started before we started the show. It's making some noises right now. I'll note it's a little bit of a cooler day, and that's awesome because it's been so hot this summer. It hasn't been very good weather for canning, because when you do have a lot of heat and these things are boiling on your stove top for hours at a time. So if it's a really hot day, it can make your house really hot. So you've got a jar, the lid, and the band. So this is the system that we use to can things. And then I'll show you some other piece of equipment you need. This is a jar grabber. Maybe it has a better name than that. That's what I call it. So this lets you pick up these jars out of hot water. And it may seem like a fussy little piece of equipment, but I don't know how you do this without. And do not, and I speak from experience here, try to use your tongs to grab your jars, because they slip and then they break in the bath, and you have glass in boiling water. It's a mess. So I would say don't do that. These are what you need. They're like $2 or $3 at a hardware store, and you're usually in the canning section, and they're made specifically to lift the canning jars. They work with the smaller jars as well, and that's a piece of equipment that you really need to do canning. And you know, and I'm talking from experience, right, Lou? Second thing you need is you need a big pot to boil your jars. You could do this in any pot really, but it's easiest if you have a canning pot like I have right here. You can get canning pots that do pressure canning, and that's appropriate for canned meats and things like that. We're not going to do any of that. We're doing just canned vegetables and pickles and things like that. So we don't need the pressurized one, but you could get that if you wanted to have the extra level of safety for more hazardous canned goods. It's more expensive to get a pressurized one. This is just a really simple enamel pot. Again, this is sold at hardware stores, where places where you can buy canning products. And if you, so I'm not going to pick up the jars exactly. Instead I'm just lifting up there's like a rack in here, and I'm just trying to lift this rack out. Maybe I'll do it like this. There we go. Okay. So you can see here, I have all these jars. There's a rack that comes with this, and the rack has a spot for each of these jars, and it holds them like reasonably well. They're a little wobbly, but it's not too bad. And I filled this with enough water that these jars were submerged by about an inch under the water. And I've been boiling them in there. So this is helping to sanitize these jars and make sure that they're in really good shape for our canning. There are other ways you can sanitize jars. I think some people use their dishwasher's sanitize cycle, and that's another approach. So I'm just going to point out, once I put that down there, that's about how deep it is. So it goes to about there. So I really do want like an inch on top of the glass, and so these are fine. But that's something that so this is a piece of equipment you're going to need, is some pot, a canning pot. You're going to need this jar picker upper thing. I think that's all the specialized equipment you need. Oh, there's one more thing, which is one of the things I use all the time in the kitchen, and now I'm going to have to hunt it down because it's something that I use all the time in the kitchen. Maybe it's behind you, sorry. There it is. Okay.
Yes.
So this is a canning funnel. Now, I love these because when I use, like I said, I use these for leftovers, so I use this all the time to fill up these jars, and it works really, really well. You can also use it with the smaller ones. And they have plastic versions of these, but I use it so often. I had some plastic ones that I would just chew through them, and then I decided to get a stainless steel one. I've had this now for years. And this is going to help us fill our jars without making a mess. This is a really important thing to have for a couple reasons. One, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to fill the jar, but it's not just that. When this goes into the jar, it's going to protect the rim of the jar, and we don't want to get the rim dirty. So when this goes into the jar, it'll make sure everything goes in the jar, and then when you carefully pull this away, that rim is going to be completely clean. And you need this to be really clean. You're going to see when we're canning, we're probably going to make a few mistakes and we get a little something on the rim. We're going to actually go through and wipe those clean in those cases, because if there's anything on that rim when you put the lid on, it won't seal properly. So keeping that rim clean is a really important part of canning properly, and this tool helps you do that. So those are the pieces of equipment you need. You need some jars, this picker-upper thing, you need the funnel, and you need a pot. And if you've got those, and you can use these over and over again. You can see this one's been around a bunch of years. So it's sort of a one-time investment, but you do need those things to get started. I put our recipe up for today. So the first thing, Blue thinks it's funny. The first thing we have on the recipe is we wash everything. And so these jars, you can see they're all nicely arranged. I've scrubbed these with hot water and soap. And that's important with clean sponge and clean hands. So I wash that. I'm going to use this. This has been scrubbed clean. We're going to use that. That's been scrubbed clean. We're using the pot. It's been scrubbed clean. Everything you're going to use here, you want to scrub it clean with hot water and soap. You just want a very sterile, super clean environment. Hopefully your kitchen's always clean, but this is like extra clean. Before Blue and I start handling things, we're going to wash our hands really well with soap and water, which we would do anyway, but it's an important part of this. And if we think anything's going to get dirty, we're going to wash it again. So wash everything is step number one. Step number two is boil the jars, which we've already gotten that started. So we're underway. Step number three is peeling the tomatoes. So that's the next thing we're going to do. So we've got a lot of tomatoes to peel. What we'll probably do is, for the show, is we won't do all of these because I'll bore everybody. I'm not entertaining enough that you'll all want to watch me peel tomatoes for an hour. So we'll probably do a few batches, fill some jars, and get them in there processing so you can see what that looks like. And then you'll probably go off and have your dinner or do whatever you're going to do while we are at work canning over and over and over again here, because we have a lot of tomatoes to can. All right, and then we're going to need a little lemon juice, so we're going to have to squeeze those lemons, and we're going to put everything in the jar, and then we're going to boil the jar. So that's our recipe. That's how we're doing this. So the jars are boiling. I've got water right here that's just coming to a boil. This water we're going to use to peel the tomatoes. And Vincenzo's still giving me trouble about my knife. He sent me a YouTube video on how to sharpen knives, which was really thoughtful of him. Thank you, Vincenzo. The knife is not that dull, but it hasn't been sharpened for about a month, so it's not at its peak sharpness state, but it's good enough. I love sharpening knives, but I don't feel like it should be I don't feel like it should be a fetish. And I think that working with a knife that's not been just sharpened is okay thing to do. All right, so we're going to peel some of these tomatoes. This is the same thing you would do if you wanted to make fresh tomato sauce too, which we haven't done on the show, but we'd use the same kind of process. So we're going to take a tomato. So we've got one here, and we're going to give them all a good wash. So, go ahead and fill that guy up. All right, that's awesome. That's good. So these all have they have a little dirt on them from the field, so we want to get them nice and clean. And actually, we should wash our hands because I promised we were going to do that. Washing your hands is always a good idea from a food safety standpoint, but when it comes to canning, you literally may not be able to can the vegetables or whatever you're canning if you don't have really clean hands, because you'll end up having the lids pop. And you can see when I'm washing my hands, this should, hopefully, people have seen this before, but you really want to wash up your sleeve a little bit. And you can see I'm rinsing my hands until I get all that silky peeling off of them, which takes a little bit. And I've also washed between my fingers and on the back of my hands. You really want everything washed. So Blue's washing his hands right now, and I just picked something up off the floor, so it's a good idea for me to wash my hands with it again, which is important to know. If I grab my hair, if I touch my face, I'd want to wash my hands again. If I pick my nose, anything like that, you want to wash your hands again. All right, and I'm going to get some water on these tomatoes while Blue's washing his hands. So in the restaurant industry, people for a long time said sing happy birthday twice. I think the idea is you really want to wash your hands for about 20 seconds. It's a good reminder for everybody as we're going back to school and trying to figure out the next stages of COVID awareness. All right, so you're seeing me do the same thing. If you've watched a lot of these episodes, you've seen me do this before, but if you're tuning in for the first time, it might be new to you. When I wash vegetables, I really want to submerge them all the way in water. So it's not like I'm just holding them under the faucet. I'm actually filling up the water all the way and submerging the vegetable in the water. How you doing there, bud? Good. And then what I'm going to do with these, I'm going to hold that down. Actually, I'm going to wait for Blue to come see because I want him to do some of these too. All right. So I'm going to hold this like that. I'm going to take the knife and I'm going to slice the end of it, just a little slice, not very deep, and I'm going to slice it again. So I made a cross on the end of the tomato. So, yep, so you're going to just come on that side and you're just going to make, so the way you're going to do this once you get rolling, you're just going to cross them like that, and so you can see, it is fun.
I like it.
But you can see why we're not going to make you guys sit here when we do all of the tomatoes, because there's a lot of tomatoes to cross. But it's going to feel so much fun when in the winter time when it's like Friday night and we're going to make a pasta dinner to like open up our own jar of tomatoes, make some spaghetti or something. All right, so that's great. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these tomatoes and we're going to put them in there. That one wasn't done? All right. Alright, so I've got a slotted spoon right here. If you don't have a slotted spoon, you could use tongs. I basically want something to retrieve these. If you have one of these fancy pots with like a pasta like strainer in there, you could use that. But I don't want to pour this whole pot out each time because I've got to do this over and over and over again. So I want to pull the tomatoes out. So I open up this lid. This is at a full boil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop these in. When you're dropping things in hot water, don't drop it from up here, okay? Because what's going to happen is that water is going to splash and it could really hurt you. It's the same thing with oil or anything like that. So if you come over and see this, what I'm doing is I'm careful. I'll save one so you can see. I'm bringing it down so the tomato's just touching the water and I'm letting go. And that's going to be a very safe way for me to put them into the hot water. Don't drop it from up here, okay? Bad idea. And it's even worse in oil. Yeah, don't play basketball with it. It's even worse in hot oil. You drop something into a fryer from on high and it's like, it can splash back and really hurt you. So the idea is you just get really close to the surface and then you won't have a problem. So we're watching these guys. They're going to go really fast. They need like 30 to 60 seconds. It doesn't take very long. And we're not going to wait for the water to come back to a boil or anything. What we're really looking for is what I see right here. So you see how the skin is starting to peel back a little bit on this tomato. That's what we're looking for. See, that's getting ready to come up. So I'm going to pull that one out. And that was a smaller tomato, so it looks like it came a little faster than the others. But yeah, we're starting to get to that spot. And this is a similar thing to what you do to peel peaches. All right, so this one's looking good. You can see that one's starting to come off. All right, now they're probably all about there. Oh, that one's not quite here. This one's really there. I guess when I was dropping them, they didn't all go in at the same time, so maybe that's explaining it. That one's really peeling. Do you want to try and fish them out, Blue?
Sure.
Ooh, that one's like flayed itself. Look at that.
Oh my
It's
God.
like already peeling itself. It's like, I'm ready, guys! Let's make it talk tomato dish. Yeah. So, yeah, you want to get the ones that are these ones here. Hey, Ma, you want to help? Nice job.
Well, that's big. The problem is I'm not tall enough to see the ones that
Here,
are so,
I'll help out.
blind.
So I get the last ones. So last thing I'll say on this is we are, I've read a lot of things saying, oh, you need to make sure you put them in cold water to stop the cooking of the tomato. I don't know. I mean, we're going to cook the tomatoes for 85 minutes, so I'm not really that concerned about the cooking of the tomato, but I am concerned about our fingers, and these are pretty hot right now. So putting them in cold water will help make them more touchable. And we need to touch them to put them in the tomato jars. All right, so while those are cooling off, I'm going to come back over here. And this is a step that is really more of an adult step. I wouldn't ask kids to do this. Excuse me, Vi. Is what we're going to do right now is I'm going to take a bunch of these jars out of boiling water. So first thing is I'm going to lift up this tray that holds them. And it's a little bit heavy because there's a lot of jars in there and they all have liquid. And you can see I put the funnel in there so that the funnel is super clean now. And then I have these jars, and remember, I'm not going to use the tongs because that can result in disaster. So instead, I'm going to go and reach in with my jar picker-upper, and I'm going to carefully pour the hot water out of this jar. This is why this is not a job for kids. And I'm going to go ahead and put the jar on my table. Now, I don't think my wooden table is going to be damaged by the heat of this, but if you were concerned about what the surface you had, you could go ahead and put a towel down. It's not a bad idea. In fact, we could just do that right now for a little. Here, do you want to help me put that towel down? That'll absorb anything that falls out. So we're just putting a little kitchen towel down underneath. And we're going to be filling these as efficiently as we can. So we're just going to want to set them all up close to one another. The other thing I'll note is these jars, you'll see I have some different ones. This one's really cool. I like that one a lot. It has like no labels on it. I think that jar may have come with some food in it, some product, and they have like some special commercial version of the jar. Most of the jars have some sort of decorative stuff on them. I like that one a lot. But, I'm using, these jars are mostly older, so I'm just using the jars I have.
Why do you put the hot water in it?
Well, that's a great question about it. Do you remember when we were reading about, all the microbe hunters?
Yeah.
And remember we were learning about how those microbes get killed in boiling water?
Yeah.
Well, that's why, because we want to kill the microbes. I'm trying to sanitize these. The reason I'm fussing with this particular jar is it had a little bit of rust in it that I think it was picking up from just the water in the pot. Had a little bit of rust floating around it. It was like, actually this one has a little bit. See that? I think the pot just had a little bit of rust in it. See that little flakes in there? So I'm just going to rinse it out. Hopefully it can come out. That one is not coming out very well. There it goes. Okay. I mean, it probably would harm us to have the rust in with the tomatoes. It'd be like a little extra iron, but this is going to get that out of there. This one has the same issue. It's funny, some of them, I don't know how they got it in there.
Do you think from the...
Maybe just when it was boiling so hard, they just, little flakes of rust just boiled up. So you just want to be careful and cautious. You see I'm moving sort of slowly and deliberately because I'm dealing with boiling water. I don't want to hurt myself too badly. We had a real disaster early on in Clover. One of my employees, his name is Hat, picked up a pot of boiling water and it fell on her leg. And just the boiling water just falling on her leg caused really severe burns and took her a while to recover from it. I felt terrible about it. I hadn't even been thinking about that kind of thing happening. So now we have, I think it was on the truck and it was hot, so I think she was wearing shorts or something. And now then we started instituting a rule, everybody had to wear pants to work, which nobody liked in the middle of the summer. But that's why we didn't operate when it was over 90. All right, we're almost here. Almost here. So all that little bit of rust I'm finding in the bottom of a bunch of these is making it take a little longer than usual, but better to be careful and thorough. So these have all come out of the boiling water. They're super clean and ready to go. I'm going to move my knives out of the way. I don't need this here anymore. And we will need some lemon juice. So Blue, maybe while I'm peeling some tomatoes, you could squeeze some lemons. Is that cool? Let's see. What should we put the lemon juice in? Do you know what might be best?
What?
What if you squeeze the lemon juice into one of these jars? I think that's the best idea. All right. Yeah, because you're picking your nose.
Right now.
Welcome to I always think that's funny. It's on all the safety posters. It's like you touch your hair, or you pick something off the ground, or you pick your nose. Like, well, I hope people aren't doing that. Okay. So the skin came off really easily. You see it, I have this beautiful tomato here. And I'll show you why we use these kind of tomatoes. These are Roma tomatoes. And the reason we use these is, do you see they're like very meaty. So they make a nice sauce. We can try putting an heirloom tomato in. We can make a jar of heirloom too. But you'll see they're much more watery than this. This one's less watery. So that's the reason we're using these. And we're going to...
Do you have that little knife?
yes, it's right behind. I'll go right here, bro.
Oh, thank you.
You got it. So you can slice these or quarter these, or you can crush these. You can put these through a mill if you really want to crush them. My plan today is to just peel them like this.
Do you want me to squeeze all of them, or just like...
Yes, I think we're gonna need all of them.
Wow, that's
And
a lot of...
I know it seems like a lot, huh? It used to be when I was a kid, around my house, there would always be at this time of the season, roadside stands or farms just selling boxes of these tomatoes for like $20 or less. So people would can a lot, and it was easy to get your hands on a box of tomatoes. I don't know as many farms that do that anymore, and I was thinking maybe we'll try to do this for Clover, like let people pick up a whole canning set of peaches or tomatoes. Obviously there was one point in time where a lot of people just use their own stuff, but many of us like food, but we don't have an acre of tomatoes. So let's see if I can connect some of you with our farmers at Clover and make that an option you can pick up at the restaurant. But do expect it to be, it's not going to be like the $15 I remember when I was a kid. I think we probably are going to end up having to sell these for about $40 or $50 for a box. Alright, so do you see that packing in there? There's some bubbles in there, and we're going to want to get rid of those bubbles. But we're getting to a pretty good place. I don't want to pack it too high, because you need to leave a little space at the top for the canning to work. I've got a small one here, and I'm hoping that's going to be just the right amount. That looks good to me. So when you're doing jellies and jams, that height, the head space it's called, can be very sensitive. It's a little less sensitive in this case, but it does still matter. You don't want to fill it all the way to the top for a few different reasons. And I am now, this is a muddler. This is like something I use for mixed drinks, but it's also handy for other things like this. I'm washing with hot water and soap, and I'm going to use this to just crush those a little bit down and try to get some bubbles out. I really like this style of canned tomatoes. They're just in their own juice. They're not like a fully processed crushed tomato, but they're not too watery. You can see that's just, I think this is awesome. It's like what we're looking for. There's still a lot of bubbles in there we want to get out, and I'm going to grab another little tool to help with that. This tool looks like a chopstick. It is a chopstick. Again, some hot soapy water, keeping everything super clean. And you can buy a canning tool for this, believe it or not, but a chopstick works really well. And you see what I'm doing, I'm reaching in there. I've already been pretty effective here, but I'll try and show you a little more clearly on the next one. I'm just trying to release little holes of little collections of bubbles in there. So I'll show you on the next one. Blue, that's smelling really lemony and delicious.
Yeah.
Hey, Violet, where'd you go, sweetie? Do you want to help? This is a part you could help with. I didn't want to have you pulling those jars out of the hot water, but I'll have you help me jam these tomatoes into these pots. You know, after all that talk about the funnel, I'm realizing we don't really need to use the funnel with these tomatoes. We would need it with other things like applesauce and stuff, but in this case, they're just sort of dropping in there.
You're not going to use it?
I do love the funnel. Well,
It's fun though.
yeah, we just don't need to really use them here. I guess, I mean, you could put them in, but it's harder to drop the tomatoes into the funnel, right? We could do that. You want to put the funnel there, Vi? Grab that funnel, put it on the left jar and fill it. Yeah.
Why is it fun there?
Oh, that's because we were just saying we had no use for it. We said use it anyway. So what we're doing, Vi, we're just pulling the skins off these guys. Once you get the skins off, then you go ahead and just pop it in there. Okay? Now I'm just gonna go ahead and press those down a little bit.
I really don't think you need the fun.
What's that?
I really don't think you need the
No,
fun.
you don't really. It does keep the lid, the rim a little bit clean, which is helpful. So like I said, we'll fill up a couple of these and I'll show you guys how to put lids on them. We'll get them going in the boil, and then we'll share some shots of them finally canned. But I won't make you all sit here and watch us process all these boxes. Now, in this case, some of the skin is holding on a little bit at the bottom here. That's okay. We don't need to get like 100% of the skin off. I mean, you know, if it satisfies you, you can do that, but it's not going to hurt you when you're making the tomato sauce to have a little teeny flake of skin or something. But I would definitely work to get most of the skin off. That's it's going to be nicer with skin free. How's that one working for you, Vi? Ooh, look at this one. Sometimes they're easier to peel than others. That one is really ready to go.
This one's not hard.
No, almost there. Okay, this is a great example. I'm really happy I found this. So, this tomato right here is nice and ripe, but it has a little bit of a bad spot. You can see this? It's got like a little bit of bad spot there. It's like right there. You can just see it's discolored. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm just going to cut that bad spot out. You can see that discoloration. I'm trying really hard on the show to like find examples of that when fruits or vegetables aren't 100% perfect. We can still use them. I think that maybe when I started cooking, and maybe some of the advice I got from people, that everything had to be perfect or you just tossed it, but I don't think that's a great idea. You end up with a lot of waste that way, and we really can make use of things that aren't perfect. Alright, this one's a little too much tomato. I need to take some of this one out and put it in the next jar. Alright, that's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and crush these tomatoes down a little bit with my muddler. Yeah, that's okay. This one was a little overfilled, that's why the juice came out. If you don't have a muddler, you could use the bottom of a wooden spoon to do this. Any other instrument you have, or you could do without it. That helps me get it to a texture I like. Now I'm gonna try and see if there's any bubbles left in here. It's looking pretty good, but this is the bubble hunter, and then I'm trying to go down the sides and just make sure all the bubbles are gone. This one didn't have many bubbles on it. It looked pretty good. This one's a great example of one that's a very sloppy rim. So we're gonna have to clean that up before we put a lid on it. Violet, should we do one more jar, and then we're gonna put some lids and process them? No, you can use the funnel blue, but rinse it off.
This one's already Papa.
All right. Nice job, Vi. You're a good little tomato peeler. And while you peel that, I'm gonna get one more tomato for us so we can fill this jar. 'Cause I think we're gonna need one more than we have. All right, go ahead and pop it right in there. Oh, that's right, Blue. That one, keep up it. Make sure it's really well washed. So you can see the tomatoes packing in there. Violet's got one there, and I've got one more. One more coming. Now with this recipe, there's not a lot of harm in going a little bit longer, so I'm going to put these in before all the rest of the jars are ready. Normally I would probably wait until I had all the jars ready to go. But if these end up boiling, you want to make sure the minimum time is that 85 minutes. So when we put the last jar in, we'll start a timer. These may end up being in there for 120 minutes. It's okay. It's not going to hurt them. So I just got a clean kitchen towel, and I'll show you what this is for in a minute. How's that guy going by? If you're wondering why I'm using lids on the pots, that just keeps some of the steam out of the house. Now this one's quite hot. It's getting too hot for my fingers. Cool that down a little bit. Yeah.
Whoa.
It was hot. Yeah. When I was a kid, my dad used to say he had asbestos fingers, and he sort of did. My dad has like no feeling in his fingers, so I think he got a frostbite when he was younger. My fingers aren't quite like that, but they do handle heat pretty well. Most people who spend a little time in the kitchen end up having tolerance to hot things. All right, so you see in here, see the bubbles, and I'm just going to go ahead and crush the tomatoes. I don't need to overdo it. I'm just trying to break them up a little bit. And this process is doing a pretty good job working out the bubbles. But if I had bubbles in there still, I would release the bubble pockets with a chopstick. All right, let's actually could use one more tomato. Let's get one more in there. I was hoping to show an example of bubbles trapped in there, but I'm not having much luck with that. We're just not having bubbles trapped today. I got one more. Oh, well, we'll put in a whole bunch more, Violet. Blue will show you how to do that. He's to show you how to cross it.
The crossing's fun.
Alright, so Blue's doing such a great job with this lemon juice. What we want to do with the lemon juice is bring the acid level up. So you could didn't have lemon juice, you could use vinegar. I don't know if I'd recommend that, but you could. You could also use citric acid, which is like a artificial lemon juice, or it's just like the sour part of lemon juice. You usually can get that in powder form, so you can add citric acid to this. In our case, we're going to go and take it stings cuts. So I'm going to do tablespoon measures. I'm trying to make sure I don't get any lemon seeds in there.
Sorry.
It's okay. Well, I should, I've got a little tool to make sure these don't get in. I'll show you. I forgot to show it to you. So I'm giving these each nice little tablespoon. How many lemons is this?
1, 2, 3.
3 lemons?
3 whole lemons.
3 whole lemons, 3 whole jars.
6, 3 lemons, 6 like that.
So, awesome. Let me give you a little something that you're gonna like. Here it is.
Wait, can you put that with the funnel?
But yeah, it was cool. So this is an insert for the canning funnel, and it'll catch the seeds. All right. So we've got this one last tomato in here. We got to get out. So Cuckoo's saying it's 5 o'clock. Wow. All right. Time flies when you're canning. So we go ahead and we put those tomatoes in there. There we go. So these are just tomatoes with their own juice and a little bit of lemon juice added. By a little bit, it's about a tablespoon of lemon juice added. Now, this is a very important step. You want to use paper towels or a very clean dish towel to make sure that lid has nothing on the top rim. If you don't do this, you're probably not going to get a good seal. And if you don't get a good seal, your canned things are going to go pop, 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 pop. And if that happens, you just put them in the fridge and eat them right away. But you won't be able to bring this wonderful tomato into the winter time. So we want to try and see if we can get that super cleaned up. Okay, and then I'm just going to point out again, we mentioned it earlier, but there's something called headspace here. There's a gap between the top of the tomatoes and the top of the can, which is important. So the thing we're going to do right now is we're going to get some lids ready. I need 3 lids, and we're going to get some bands ready. I need 3 bands. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop these lids, and I'm going to turn this off. I don't want it at a full boil. In fact, I may even just I think that one will be a little too small. It's fine. I just turned off the heat so it brings it off a boil. A boil's a little too hot, but you want these just under a boil for about 30 or 40 seconds. So I also put the lids in there. Yeah, the lids I'm just sanitizing, just to make sure everything we're working with is totally sterile. And okay, so now I'm just going to take this and I'm going to gently set it on. Once you set it on, we're going to tighten it down with that band. And once we tighten it with the band, we're going to make sure we don't mess around with it, because you don't. At that point, it's trying to form a good seal, and if you jostle it, you'll end up ruining that seal that's being formed. So, and then what's going to happen? It's the same thing when you screw up any canning. They're going to go pop, 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 and then you're going to put them in the fridge and eat them, and they won't go till winter. So you see, I just set those on gently, and then I'm going to use these bands. There we go. Just like finger tight. I'm not going too tight. I'm going to use these bands. I'm going to put that finger tight on there. And it's just holding it in place. what's going to happen is this is going to boil, and then when it cools, there's going to be a vacuum created because it's going to boil and gases are going to come out of this. And then as it cools, it's going to create a bit of a vacuum that'll pull these lids down like that, and it will have a suction keeping it all airtight. And then if your lids pop, like I mentioned, that just means that you've lost that vacuum. And usually happens because some of the stuff in there is fermenting, or maybe you didn't make a good seal with your lid in the first place. And once these are done, oh, that's a good hint too. Do you see I almost dropped it, but I'm holding it like this. You really don't want to drop these jars. It's a total mess. I've done that before too. And I'm distributing these in here so that they don't cause it to go wonky. Alright. And now, I'm going to bring this back up to a boil. So I'll bring the heat back on there. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to lift this up and gently set it down into the one. And that's going to come to a full boil, and we're going to have it in there for a minimum of 85 minutes. After 85 minutes, we're going to pull these out carefully one at a time, and we're going to let them cool on a rack. And then you'll hear the pop, 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 pop. As they cool, they're going to pull those lids down and form the vacuum. And once they're all cooled, we're going to put them up on the shelf here. And if you don't have a shelf in your kitchen, you're going to keep them in your basement or somewhere else, that's fine. But you do want to keep them someplace you can keep an eye on them for a day or so, because you want to check them after like 14 maybe like in the morning, maybe 24 hours. You want to check them to see if any of those popped. And then maybe 2 days in, check them to see if any of those popped. And if the lids pop, those ones go in the fridge and you eat them right away. If the lids don't pop, then you can keep them for a long time. But I think that'll probably be the end of the show, and I'll just show some pictures of the final product. And we've got a lot more work to do here. So we're going to maybe have a big bunch of canned goods at the end of the evening. Thanks for joining us. Do you want to invite Tina?
Bye.